As part of measures to provide uninterrupted and adequate power supply in Nigeria and ensure least cost electrification aligned with Nigeria's energy transition goals and the phasing out of self-generation practices, inclusivity and sustainability, the federal government has unveiled the National Integrated Electricity Policy to improve the power sector. The National Integrated Electricity Policy highlights policy direction of the power sector under the new Electricity Act 2023, providing direction of the industry from government-owned to private sector-driven. It also identifies gains of the sector and challenges as Nigeria targets universal access to electricity by the year 2030. Now, what does this mean for the Nigerian power sector at this time? And how will it impact on the citizens and the economy in general? These and more are some of the questions our experts on the program will be providing answers to. Thanks for joining us. I am Ikeria Clinton, and welcome to Nigeria Today. With me in the studio for the conversation on the National Integrated Electricity Policy is NTE's power correspondent, Joshua Ujito. It's a pleasure to have you in Nigeria Today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, Joshua, talk to us about, you were there at the unveiling. I know it's, we have the National Integrated Electricity Policy and, of course, the Integrated Resource Plan together, kind of a two-in-one policy. So talk to us about this and what are some of the highlights of these policies?
Okay, thank you very much once again for another opportunity to be on this program. I was opportune to be at the unveiling of the National Integrated Electricity Policy, as well as the National Integrated Resource Plan. And also it was another opportunity or a forum to canvass for private sector participation in the power sector. You'll recall that the power sector was privatized in 2013, and since then the act that was used or midwife the privatization was the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005. That act was repealed and it was signed by President Bola Tinubu in 2023, making it now Electricity Act 2023. Now, a sector that is coming from or transiting from a government-controlled sector now to private-controlled sector, that is the transition. Electric Power Sector Reform Act was used to midwife the sector into the private hands, which is partially privatized now. And now that the market is transiting to a competitive market, there is need now to repeal that act, which is the Electricity Act 2023. Now, with the Electricity Act 2023, to make it more simpler, or to harmonize, or what the act entails, there is need again to break it into, let me put it this way, into simple language for us to implement it, or a practical language. Let's make this act practicable. How do we make this practicable? The Federal Ministry of Power now has the mandate within 1 year to now dissect this Electricity Act 2023 into a document that is now called the National Integrated Electricity Policy. And this is the copy of a summary of what the policy entails. So it's a 8 chapters document which now deals with how the sector evolves from privatization to privatization, and now that we are hoping to go into a competitive market whereby it let the market forces determine how the sector will be run, there is need now for this document. And also the National Integrated Resource Plan. This is another document again that now look at the available resources that Nigeria has. How do we now harness it? Nigeria is so rich, it's a gas nation. Nigeria is rich in renewable energy sources, but all these are not tapped. And that is why there is need for this policy to harmonize this and bring it in a holistic way, bring all the sectors, all the sector players involved, and see how this can be implemented. And you also have to, let me draw your attention also that the new Electricity Act now decentralize the power sector in such a way that the subnationals can now go into it. And that is why we have now 11 states have already pulled out of the national market, establishing their own state electricity regulatory commission. But this cannot be successful if all stakeholders did not come together to harmonize how these subnationals will also collaborate with the federal government to ensure that the whole goal of this thing is to ensure universal access to electricity, how Nigerians can be able to access electricity using gas, using renewable energy sources, and so many other factors, and as well channel investment or attract more investment into the sector.
Thank you very much. We are now being joined by Bode Fadikpe. He's an energy expert and also a public affairs analyst. Bode, it's good to have you in Nigeria today.
So much for having me. Good evening.
Bode, wanted to share your view on these newly unveiled policy, talking about the National Integrated Electricity Policy and, of course, the Integrated Resource Plan. Share your view with us.
Well, first and foremost, let us commend the Honorable Minister for coming this far. The last time we saw a document of this nature was around 2001. So between 2001 and dates, you have 24 years in between. So it means that the document that has just been reviewed has existed for 24 years. And if a document has existed for 24 years for a sector as strategic and as important as the power sector, and given all of the developments that has taken place technologically all over the world, it's only important that we look at a document that can also bring the market in tandem with current technological advancement, current population development or the population growth, current need for market equity, for market response, current need for industries, and so many other needs like that. We need to look at a document that can give us a semblance of what we want. So, but having said that, I think one thing we must look at generally is what is the intention of this document? What does this document want to achieve? This document seeks to achieve three things. One, healthy capitalization. It seeks to achieve universal access. And then it seeks to achieve electricity reliability. And I think these are the three things that the market has been pursuing for some time that the market has not been able to achieve. Healthy capitalization, by which it is meant that the market has access to capital that can bring about development. The market also seeks to use technological advancement to bring about universal access to electricity. In other words, both those who are in the rural areas, those who are in the urban area, wherever you are living in Nigeria, you should be able to have access to electricity. The third one is electricity reliability, which is a major issue. Now that we are going into the rainy season, what is the hope of electricity users? What was the hope of what was their hope some few months ago, some few weeks ago? We know that the whole of last year was characterized majorly by grid instability, grid disturbance, so many names we got last year. So this document is intended to bring about electricity reliability such that people will feel more comfortable using public electricity rather than their own private electricity. These are three fundamentals that the policy seeks to achieve. And if the policy can achieve these three fundamentals, I can assure you that we already have a power sector that we can boast of.
Very much, but now back to you, Joshua. From what you explained about this new policy, most of the things you talked about, I don't know, probably you also try to, correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the things you mentioned about this policy have been addressed in the new Electricity Act 2023. So what makes this policy different?
And just like I said, in a layman language, it's just a way of making it more simpler, making the Electricity Act more simpler for those that will implement it, for the stakeholders. And again, in addition to what Bode Fadipe said, this policy document is also all about harmonizing players in the sector. Like I said, now the sector has been decentralized. So it is not something that state or the subnationals will just rush into it. But there is need for coordination, and that is what the document seeks to answer. That the subnationals and the federal, and also the private players, the international donors and all other sector players, there must be coordination while implementing the new Electricity Act, so that we shouldn't rush into implementing the Electricity Act and then ended up into crisis again in the power sector. For instance, the Electricity Act 2023 mandates states to generate, transmit, and also distribute their own electricity. But you also have it in the new Electricity Act that in a situation whereby all the transmission electricity in the subnational should be within areas not covered by the national grid. That is to say, areas that are covered by the national grid, even if it is in the subnational jurisdiction, the NEC, that is the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, also have oversight over that one. Therefore, that is to say, the NEC also has a way of also regulating or overseeing what is happening in subnationals. And also, when transmission lines move from one state to the other, definitely it is under the purview of the NEC, not of the state. Therefore, the sector players need to come together, and then how do we implement this thing? So the policy document is more of harmonizing all sector players. Let us see how we can move forward. What Nigerians want is reliable electricity that is also available and also affordable. And also, just like Bode said, the document also seeks to open the sector to investors, the opportunities in the investors. For instance, like what the Minister of Power said in the afternoon during the unveiling, that just last year, only last year, the sector witnessed more than $2 billion investment, and government targets more than 50 billion investment in the sector before 2013. Therefore, all these things are also addressed in the policy document. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that there is no conflict between the policy document and the Electricity Act 2023. Rather, the policy document summarizes what is contained in the Electricity Act 2023, making it more simpler for sector players to work with.
Now, Bode, you rightly mentioned some of the challenges we have in the power sector. How can this policy address these challenges? For instance, you mentioned the grid collapse that we keep having, over the years, and of course, in the area of power generation, distribution, and of course overall reliability. How can this policy, enhance the power sector in these areas?
Well, a policy roadmap that leads you to a destination. The policy is a guide. It's not an end on its own, but a means to an end. So I see a situation where different players in the sector, in the value chain, will pick different aspects of the policy and implement it as it relates to them. So let's take, for instance, generation sector looks at the policy and say, where does this concern me? The document, to the extent that I know, admits that we are still at 13,000 megawatts. So generation wants to ask itself, what am I expected to do to ramp up generation to go to 20,000, to go to 30,000, and to go to 50,000? What does government need to do? What enabling environments is government expected to do? Is government expected to be a guarantor between generating companies and financing institutions, whether local financing institutions or international financing institutions, as we have seen the Honorable Minister of power, going around the global community. I think it was in Japan recently, to also discuss about power issue. So to the extent of generation wants to see the extent to which it is supposed to use this policy to enhance its own functionality within the triangular environment of the sector. But again, there is also the problem. I know that as we speak today, because it's fantastic to develop a policy, but it's also more fantastic to have a functional policy. The generating sector, as we speak today, is being owed about 4.5 trillion. Does the document discuss how to liquidate this humongous? I mean, that's the budget of several states in this country today. It's only Lagos State that talks about trillion. Lagos and the federal government. All other states in this country are talking of billions. So when the generating sector alone is being owed 4.5 trillion, and we have a policy that is talking about electricity reliability, accessibility, and all of those things, then you want to start asking, is the document not a question of DOA, dead on arrival? Is that the kind of document that we are looking at here? So for me, the policy is a means to an end, not an end on its own. Will the implementers of the policy, will they have the political will to implement these policies that they have laid down? These are issues that we need to consider, because this is not the first time we're having a policy. Policies have been there, but to what extent? Just like a budget, what is the percentage implementation of the policies of before to talk about now that we have a new policy? What will be the percentage implementation when we go for another review?
Thank you very much, Bode. We'll take a break here. The conversation will continue after the break. Don't go away.
Of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow, under digital economy, for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different? We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that our questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few days to come, you see that we are all around their own crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today. Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we are looking at the National Integrated Electricity Policy that was just unveiled today by the Ministry of Power. Now, of course, I have here with me a gentleman in the studio and another gentleman via Zoom. Now, Joshua, one of the core objectives of this policy is to attract private sector investment. Were there measures outlined to encourage this?
Before I answer this question, let me also continue from where Bode Fadipe stopped. It is not all about unveiling the policy document, but it is all about implementation. And I think one thing that inspires us or inspire stakeholders during the launch of or unveiling of this policy document was efforts by the federal government to unbundle the transmission company of Nigeria. You made mention that will this address the issue of grid collapse and grid instability, especially that we had last year. And of course, this is one thing that the policy document will answer. And the process, the minister said, is almost concluded, whereby TCN will now be unbundled for us to now have Nigeria Independent Service Operator, NISO, and then the transmission service provider. In this case, TCN, there will be an arm that will manage the national grid, and then there will be an arm that will also manage the transmission of electricity. So like Fadipe said, it is for the sector players, each and everyone, to pick the parts, the 8 chapters in the policy document, and see how we can be able to implement this. And on the question of
the private sector investment,
the private sector investment. How do you attract private sector investment into the power sector? It is for you to tell them that there will be return on their investment. And that is one thing the policy document also highlights. Nigeria has that opportunities. And that is why government is now working more on the issue of addressing the liquidity in the sector, talking about tariff. A tariff that will be fair to all, a tariff that will be affordable to customers, and also will make the investors to recoup his own investment in the sector. And also the policy document is also another, it's a document that showcases Nigeria's abundant opportunities in the sector. And all these things, I believe, if they are properly implemented, it will be, should I say, a game changer for the power sector. Just like Fadipe said, we have not had this thing for more than 20 years. Now that we are having this, if it will be properly implemented, especially in line with the new Electricity Act, it should be a game changer in the sector.
Now, back to you, Bode. You talked about implementation. You are also a stakeholder body. I want you to, give recommendations on the best way you think the implementation of this policy, should be, and of course, what should be done to ensure that the objectives of this policy is, at the end of the day, achieved.
I think a fundamental thing to do is to continue to press for a greater liberalization of the sector. The sector has been, what we have seen largely in the sector is a transition from public monopoly to private monopoly. We still have not created that competitive environment. For instance, who is competing with Abuja Electricity? Who is competing with Kano Electricity? Who is competing with Kaduna Electric? Who is competing with Ikeja? What you have seen largely is one person buying Abuja Electricity, selling to another person, when the current investor is tired of the assets, he sells to another person. So we have continued to have a state of monopoly all the time. Let's look for a sector where more players can come in because the sector is attractive enough. I love the point that Joshua has made, that look, the tariff, the opportunity to enter the sector must be such that there can be free entry and free exit in such a way that anyone that is coming in, once you have the capital, you can come in at any time and you can exit at any time. The current situation is still a little bit highly regulated in such a way that it does not make it very easy for investors to come in. One of the cries of current investors today, and I've heard them say it several times, is that their return on investment, ROI, is extremely low, it's negligible. They want to sell to those who can pay. They cannot sell to them 100%. There are still political considerations. There are still social considerations. People are still looking at electricity and they are asking, is it a commodity or a social amenity? All of these things will still take us a little bit of time to solve, because the fundamental thing is the economy. And electricity plays a major role in the catalyzation of the economy. Is the economy able to provide for everyone within it that is drawing from it in such a way that a player, an end user can pay 300 naira for a unit of electricity? 300 naira looks very large, but when you convert it to international currency, you see that it's small. Today, Band A customers are paying over 200. If you feed in 1,000 naira for electricity, it gives you about 4.4 units. If you feed in about 20,000, it gives you about how many units? It gives you about 80-something units. So, and for others, they are paying far less than that. So the investor is asking, am I a Father Christmas? So a fundamental thing to consider is the tariff sufficient? That's one. Two, is the legal framework. This is a very, very important issue. What is the legal framework of the sector? Number three, what level of respect do we have for contractual relationship in the sector today? Are the contractual relationships being respected? Because again, like we have always said, the policy is the policy, but the implementation of the policy is a fundamental thing that we need to consider. Is government ready to allow that respect for contractual relationship such that people can come in and say, yes, once we enter into this contract, it will work? I know that ABBA, for instance, which is the 12th disco today. It's no longer 11 discos, and I think we need to take note of that. We have
Body, thank you very much. Now, just try in 30 seconds. You know, with the FEC approval next week, what should Nigeria, especially consumers, expect? Also other industry players, what should we expect? In the short and the long term.
What Nigerians or electricity customers should expect when FEC approve this next week is a workable document. All what Nigerians want or customers want is when they switch their bulbs, they should see light. Industry players, they want electricity that can run the economy. So that is what Nigerians expect when this document is approved next week.
Thank you very much, Joshua. This is Joshua Jito. He's our power correspondent, NTU's power correspondent. Thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure always.
And also, we had Bode Fadipe. He's an energy expert and a public affairs analyst. Bode, thank you so much for your time and your contribution.
Thank you. Good night.
And thank you for being part of the program. Remember, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTU News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTU News 24 Hub. I'm Eukaria Clinton. Goodbye.